And we're back. This is a Middle Perch live on the internet. I am your host, MTK, on the MIC. I can't hear myself at the moment, which is probably not a good idea because I might be too loud for you. So hang on just 1 second while I get that solved. Today we're going to talk about the lunar landing and take a look at this, some press we have from the time when it happened, the lunar landing. Let me find the headphones real fast so we don't have a volume issue. And there's a lot going on around here right now. There's been some painting happening. I haven't painted in a long time, so it felt good to paint. And there's been some all kinds of things going on. I'm making sun tea today outside. That's my chair, by the way. Sounds like I'm farting, but it's my chair. And what else can I tell you? It is a Saturday. My vision is really being affected. I got new bifocals, and they're hard to get used to. I might have glaucoma. I've been taking these drops, and my eyes are feeling very strange. So I don't know what's going on. I assume it's corrective. At least I hope so. Let's take a look at this magazine, Man on the Moon. 50 years ago, July 25th of 1969. This is the Time magazine from that day. Let's take a look at the section on the lunar landing. Here we go. Aldrin and Armstrong plant the U.S. flag. There's the rocket from the gantry. 50th anniversary. For newsmen covering a major story, a succession of 18 and 20-hour days is not in the least unusual. But for Time's Apollo space team, the days have grown to weeks. Associate editor Leon Jaroff and senior editor Ronald Chris had no sooner wrapped up our 14-page special Moon supplement than they were right back at work with only 1 day of rest, writing and editing this week's cover story on the historic mission itself. So this is from the publisher at the time, and they had staff everywhere. A giant leap for mankind. The moon. There's Armstrong and Aldrin and Collins. The ghostly white-clad figure slowly descended the ladder. Having reached the bottom rung, he lowered himself into the bowl-shaped footpad of Eagle, the spindly lunar module of Apollo 11. Then he extended his left foot cautiously, tentatively, as if testing water in a pool, and in fact testing a wholly new environment for man. That groping foot, encased in a heavy, multi-layered boot, size 9.5B, would remain indelible in the minds of millions who watched it on TV, and a symbol of man's determination to step, and forever keep stepping, toward the unknown. After a few short but interminable seconds, U.S. astronaut Neil Armstrong placed his foot firmly on the fine-grained surface of the moon. The time was 10:56 p.m., July 20th, 1969, 50 years ago today. Pausing briefly, the first man on the moon spoke the first words on lunar soil. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. With a cautious, almost shuffling gait, the astronaut began moving about in the harsh light of the lunar morning. Quote, "The surface is fine and powdery. It adheres in fine layers like powdered charcoal to the soles and sides of my foot," he said. "I can see the footprints of my boots and the treads in the fine, sandy particles." Minutes later, Armstrong was joined by Edwin Aldrin. Then, gaining confidence with every step, the two jumped and loped across the barren landscape for 2 hours, 14 minutes, while the TV camera they had set up some 50 feet from Eagle transmitted their movements with remarkable clarity to enthralled audiences on Earth, 250,000 miles away. sometimes moving in surrealistic slow motion, sometimes bounding around in the weak lunar gravity like exuberant kangaroos. They set up experiments and scooped up rocks, snapped pictures, and probed the soil, apparently enjoying every moment of their stay in the moon's alien environment. After centuries of dreams and prophecies, the moment had come. Man had broken his terrestrial shackles for the first time and set foot on another world. Standing on the lifeless rock-studded surface, he could see the Earth, a lovely blue and white hemisphere, suspended in the velvety black sky. The spectacular view might well help him place his problems, as well as his world, in a new perspective. Although the Apollo 11 astronauts planted an American flag on the moon, their feat was far more than a national triumph. And they have an asterisk here and a footnote. In any case, the US could not have claimed sovereignty over the moon, even if it had been so inclined. A treaty drafted in 1966 and since signed by both Washington and Moscow asserts that the moon is terra nullius, or no man's land, open to exploration and use by all nations. It was a stunning scientific and intellectual accomplishment for a creature who, in the space of a few million years, an instant in evolutionary chronology, emerged from primeval forests to hurl himself at the stars. Its eventual effect on human civilization is a matter of conjecture, but it was in any event, a shining reaffirmation of the optimistic premise that whatever man imagines, he can bring to pass. It was appropriate that the event was watched by ordinary citizens in Prague, as well as Paris, Bucharest, as well as Boston, Warsaw, as well as Wapakoneta, Ohio. In practically every other corner of the earth, newspapers broke out what pressmen referred to as their second coming type to hail the lunar landing. Poets hymned the occasion, wrote Archibald MacLeish, silver evasion in our farthest thought, the visiting moon, the glimpses of the moon, and we have touched you. 3 days and 3 nights we journeyed, steered by farthest stars, climbed outward, crossed the invisible tide rip, where the floating dust falls one way or the other in the void between, followed that other down, encountered cold, faced death, unfathomable emptiness. U.S. space officials, normally as detached and professionally cool as the astronauts they sent into space, in their own way also grew poetic. We have clearly entered a new era, said Thomas O. Paine, administrator of NASA. The voices coming from the moon are still hard to believe. For those who watched, in fact, the whole period that began with Eagle's undocking from Columbia, the command module, and its descent to the moon seemed difficult to believe. No work of the imagination, however contrived, could have rivaled it for excitement, suspense, and finally, triumph. Fascinating. This was Time magazine. They had reporters everywhere. The article's quite long. There's an image of the rocket from the gantry. Stills of from the footage on the moon. People all gathered to see the launch. The vice president. Some images speak for themselves. The scene at the Cape, Prometheus and a carnival. Wow. Pretty fascinating. 50 years ago today, the launch, first steps on the moon. Yeah, fascinating stuff. 50th anniversary edition of Time magazine. I mean, no, that's not right. The original edition that came out this week, 50 years ago. That's it for today. Just another 10-minute jobber. I'm going blind, apparently.